And here are some children, offspring, from that great government experiment. And if it wasn't for it, they may not be where they are today.
Seriously. Keep in mind the government's great experiment that I'm talking about here. I'm part of that transition, that experiment. Keep that. But I can tell you when I came to Oklahoma in my freshman year in college, and I remember when I saw this pretty black girl and she was with this white guy. I got to tell you, Slim make him testify. That's Jeff Coleman, by the way. That bothered me. I got to admit, at that time, it really bothered me. I was like, man, she's pretty and she with this guy. I had just come from Louisiana. I had a different thought process. Keep in mind, come from Louisiana and not come to Oklahoma and hang around all these white people. Can you tolerate that? Growing up in an all-black environment, mostly black, because it's segregation. You're with your own kind. There's so many of us. And then get around these guys, and you can imagine our first encounter being away from home, hanging with these guys, and what we were thinking. They recruited heavily the whole state because there weren't any black people. Imagine this. You go places and people tell you, oh, I've never been around a black person. Oh, I've never talked to a black person. Or I've never seen a black person in real life. And a person said to me, Obama created the divide. I'm like, wow. Obama was a motivator. Did you notice that? He was. People call me a motivator. You got a segment out there that wants civil war. They really do. They're not happy the way things are. They're not happy to see people that maybe like me get a better position than them. When I was a cop, when I stopped somebody, that's part of your training and how you approach the car and everything. Just hope that somebody don't pull a gun out on you, because you got hate out there, people. You've got evil out there. You've got people that are controlled by Satan. You do have evil people. There are killers that's roaming our streets and traveling our nation all the time, every day. And then imagine that transformation there, that great experiment. The government not knowing how it's going to end. Seriously, that's what we discovered. Hi, my name's Robert Wilkins, aka Basketball Tall, also your BT dispatcher. I'm going to share something with you. It's been an experiment, a cultural experiment, and I'm a pioneer in that experiment that I want to share with you. I want you to come with me as I take you on a journey that most of you have never experienced. And it's that cultural experiment that was kicked off in the beginning of the 1970s. Because we're at a day and time right now that none of us have ever experienced. This is new to me as well. But now I can explain to you how we got here and why we're here today in today's environment, where there's such now a divide. But when we had unity in a country like we've never experienced before. So what changed? What happened? Come with me as I take you on a journey from a young child in the 1960s in the state of Louisiana, and then migrating out to the West. But some people will still consider it the South, but it's not the deeper South. It has its own history, just like every state in the Union has its own history. But we know in Louisiana, it was a state where slaves were imported. That's right, slaves were imported. And as you can see, I am a dark man. But there was a point in time when people like me were not called men. I remember men like myself back in the 60s were called boy. And you just don't know how that frustrated them. Now, don't go anywhere, please. Stick with me, because what I'm about to share with you is an educational moment, and it involves you and your family as well. So here I am, a child in the 1960s. We know what went on in 1963. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Then in 1968, I believe April, one of our greatest leaders that we look to for hope, Martin Luther King Jr., was assassinated. Then a couple of months after that, Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated. Now, as we look back on black culture back in that time, we looked at John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy. They were like saviors to the black population. We had their photographs, portraits in our homes with Martin Luther King, the threesome. And they gave us hope. Why? Because we know the history of slavery. We know the history of the Reconstruction period after slavery had ended, and we know about Jim Crow as well, and the suppression and all of that, and the hangings and the lynchings. But I'm not going to talk about that. As much as some want to bury that past, we can't. It's permanently with us. We look at race in the United States like no other country because our country was built off of it. But you got to hear this story because it's a good ending for most. But then again, have you look at it from an experimental point of view like you've never seen it before? Because many of us, especially those that have gone through the educational field, talks about the great experiment. And that's what this is about today. It's a story of transition. Here I am as a child in the 1960s. We have our leaders were all assassinated in the 1960s. And then, of course, we had Lyndon B. Johnson, who was president, who followed through on what John Kennedy first started and gave us civil rights, the right to vote. Think about that. And beyond. But the thing is, some folks didn't like it. Coming from the deeper South, you know that transition, it was a challenge. Think about it. People have always lived a certain way all their lives and been in control and in power. And then all of a sudden, people that look like me got the right to vote. But here's something that we learned also by getting the right to vote, because it stems back from the days where there were laws where blacks were not allowed to read. It was against the law. Think about that. So you can see how we valued education because we knew it was a key of getting out of poverty, a key of rising, a key of being part of this experiment. But I'm going to get to it. You don't want to go anywhere because you're going to see something that you've never even thought of, because I walked through that process. I'm one of those experimenters, in a sense, you want to call it that. People like me, and people, not just people like me, all races, because all of a sudden we start coming together. But then the beginning of 1970, wow. Folks, that was the Great Migration. I often say that I remember a couple of decades ago on ESPN, the sports channel, and how they talked about the Great Migration of the black athlete. And that was in the 1970s. Because prior to all of that, there were challenges. Schools did not want, blacks to play sports on their sports team, attend their schools. There were issues deluxe. But then the floodgates opened. As we know, UCLA, they were, won 11, 12 championships with John Wooden back to back, and he had all those black players. Then remember University of Texas El Paso, I think they were called Texas Western or something like that. When was this? In the late 50s or early 60s when UTEP won a national NCAA national tournament with all 5 black players. So you can see how in the sports world, they wanted to keep that segregated. And the beginning of 1970, wow, bam, everything, the doors kicked open. I remember I graduated in 1976, but I remember the first school of interest for me in high school to play college basketball was Washington State University, part of the Pac-12 in the state of Washington. Now, I didn't know anything about Washington State, but I knew it sounded good. And it was my first letter that showed interest in me. And I was so excited. I was even in my yearbook saying, Washington State, here I come. That's my picture in the yearbook holding the basketball. But 1970s, some of the earlier states, they were giants in recruiting black players, because prior to that, we mainly went to HBCU schools. In Louisiana, we have schools such as Grambling State University, and that was only just about 30-minute ride from where I lived in Monroe. And Coach Hobdy, who was the boys basketball coach for Grambling State, came to my house to recruit me. And then we had Southern University in Baton Rouge in the state capital. They are all part of the SWAC conference, which made up of Jackson State, Alcorn, Texas Southern, Prairie View. It's a lot of them. And they were powerhouse athletic programs. Matter of fact, up to the mid-1980s, Grambling State University had produced more professional football players than any country in the nation. Of course, that was also reported on ESPN back in the day. Now think about this. Oklahoma was one of those main schools that recruited black players heavily. Oklahoma, that's right. Imagine you come from a state of about a third black population, and then you go to a state where there's only about 7%. Can you imagine the culture shock there? Because in Louisiana, everywhere I went, there were black people. I don't care where I went. I went to Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, and there I always saw black people, lots of us. So it wasn't like I was singled out. But then you come to a state like Oklahoma. Even, you go to other places, Colorado, New Mexico. And then not just that, you look at Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Oregon. There weren't hardly many people that looked like me in these places. But in Oklahoma, you're talking to recruiting where black athletes were, boy, I think they may have led the nation in the most recruiting of black athletes. And there I went to a college in Oklahoma. When I first got there, now keep in mind, I'm talking about this migration. I'm talking about this transition, the great experiment. That's what I'm talking about. And I know when I came to this state, I said, where are all the black people at? My buddy, Jeff Coleman, who was from Shreveport, he said the same thing. Where are all the black people at? Because we were accustomed to seeing us everywhere. Then all of a sudden, you can imagine how challenging that was for a lot of people like me. I know this guy we called G. He was from Shreveport. He just couldn't take it because he felt out of place. And he wanted to go back home where he felt more comfortable, in which he did. And a lot of people did that. But the 1970s was the beginning. Billy Robinson, his daughter played in the WNBA, Crystal Robinson. He was from my high school, Wasserman High School in Monroe, Louisiana. And he ventured out, and I believe that might have been 1971, came to Oklahoma. But here's what happened. You would think, because what I experienced in the 7th grade in Louisiana, when integration kicked off, going to a white school, Jefferson Junior High, in the white community. And boy, we were the beginning of that. I'm in the 7th grade. Imagine that. The horror, walking to school because the bus didn't pick us up from where we lived. And people driving cars, adults, shouting obscene things at us, throwing objects at us, trying to hit us with boards and rocks and spitting on us, everything. But then when we got on campus at Jefferson Junior High, we were safe. And then those cars just circling around the campus like sharks. Think about that. But here's what came about from that. I got involved in organized athletics, football and basketball. And then we discovered through that process, friendships developed. One thing about bringing people together is like music and athletics. That's amazing. And because of that, we got to know people. Even those, little subtle friendships were developing, but still we didn't hang out with each other. We still kept that divide. But when we were on the court or in the field, we were one. And we discovered some things. We discovered each other's humanity. Imagine all your life you've been told this or that about individuals. Then all of a sudden, when you come together like that and discover, hey, we see the human in them. Because here's what a lot of people didn't realize or don't realize. They look at, because in the older days, people like me were considered less human. Really, what was it? 2/3, 3/4 human? Somebody said something like that, supposed to try to support it with science, which was all wrong anyway. And we discovered the humanity of each other because anyone's capable of learning. And then after that goes to high school in the 9th grade to Wasserman High. And it was in the white community. And Wasserman was once an all white school. And in the 9th grade, boy, you're talking about we had war at school. Because keep in mind, when you're upperclassmen thrust into a situation, it's a little different from us guys coming in like, elementary, and middle school, junior high. For me, it was junior high. And then all of a sudden, seeing that race riot kick off over the entire campus. And it was started by the blacks, and it was organized. It just got to a point people just felt we weren't taking it anymore. But for those of us that were in the 7th, 8th grade together at Jefferson Junior High, we got to know each other a little bit better. There are some people that I, even to this day, have respect for. Randy Weisner, his wife, Debbie, who used to be a cheerleader. And her name was Debbie Hamilton. There's Steve Powell, Mark Corbin, and there's others. And these guys are white. Because when people were cheerleaders and athletes, we bonded. We had a common bond. But then when I graduated, go off to college, that great experiment, keep in mind, some people wasn't up to the task. But then again, I saw opportunity. I saw still having fun, playing ball. I saw how dominant Oklahoma was. And you guys can look that up. In the 1970s and 80s, Oklahoma dominated small college basketball, NAIA, sports in general, because they recruited heavily. The whole state, because there weren't any black people. Imagine this. You go places and people tell you, oh, I've never been around a black person. Oh, I've never talked to a black person. Or I've never seen a black person in real life. Seriously. Keep in mind the government's great experiment that I'm talking about here. I'm part of that transition, that experiment. Keep that in mind. This is what I'm talking about. And we always thought, I know when I was a kid, that other people were much smarter, that because we were brainwashed. Think about that. Throughout from slavery, and all of a sudden through Jim Crow and the freeing of slaves and all of that. And then, we hear all these things, think about, we also talked about everything whites learned, we learned. We learned their education, really, about Christopher Columbus and everybody else. We even thought, Native Americans too were savages. Think about that. I know it's funny, but it's not funny to some, but a lot of folks can testify to this. We watched the Lone Ranger, Leave It to Beaver, and Mayberry, and everybody else, just like they did. And the things we thought because of our education as well. See, some folks call that whitewash. But think about that. But then I go off to another state. And here's the thing about it. Oklahoma today, we consider this, it's considered a red state, right? Now, when we look and think about red states, we think about deep prejudice, especially in today's time because so much emphasis is brought up on it. And to discover, man, I found some of the most friendly people I'd ever encountered. Seriously. And Jeff Coleman can testify this to me, can testify to this as well. Not just that, we learn things about one another. I remember we'd be in the dorm hanging out with these guys, going places. They telling us stuff, and we're laughing. Keep in mind, come from Louisiana, not come to Oklahoma and hang around all these white people. Can you tolerate that? Growing up in an all-black environment, mostly black, because it's segregation. You're with your own kind. There's so many of us. And then get around these guys, and you can imagine our first encounter being away from home, hanging with these guys, and what we were thinking, our own prejudices. To discover, they ain't no better than me. They ain't no smarter than me. Seriously, that's what we discovered, because we're all capable of learning on the same scale. Keep in mind, we're human beings. We're all in the image of our Creator. Some of us have kinky hair. Some of us have straight hair. Some of us got brown eyes, green, blue, dark skin, light skin. But we're all in the image of our Creator. And here's what I learned. I love my kids just as much as they do. Think about that. Now, think about when kids were taken from their parents during slavery. I am a product of slavery, my ancestry. They had the same feelings and emotions that I have to this day. We were just educated differently. Or let's say they had no education, but they were smarter than people gave them because that's how they had to survive. But being around these guys and then hearing their stories, where they come from, and some of them are from the deeper South, like in Arkansas, Tennessee, and they would tell us most in-depth thoughts about things when it came to race. And we shared the same. And then to later discover, finding myself going home with them, spending the night with them. And then imagine that transformation there, that great experiment. The government not knowing how it's going to end. And then dispelled a lot of myths about one another. Yeah, we're different, of course. God is a great creator. Look at, God He's a master artist. Have you noticed? Look at the planet. But then, of course, education was the key. Getting opportunities after college and having to work and deal with people that didn't look like me. But you know, it all comes down to right, wrong. And here's what bonds all of us together in this country. This great experiment became about its laws. Every city, state, and federal law and the Constitution. That's why we behave the way we behave today. Black, white, Native Americans, you name them, Asians. We all behave similarly because of our laws. Foreigners can tell Americans because of our laws and our education, because basically we're taught mainly the same thing. But I can tell you, when I came to Oklahoma in my freshman year in college, and I remember when I saw this pretty black girl and she was with this white guy. I got to tell you, Slim make him testify. That's Jeff Coleman, by the way. That bothered me. I got to admit, at that time, it really bothered me. I was like, man, she's pretty and she with this guy. I had just come from Louisiana. I had a different thought process. And now, all of a sudden, from my profession, 30 years in the criminal justice field, rose up to supervising 5 counties because I've encountered a lot of good people. See, here's what we need to remember, folks. There are good people everywhere. Our Bible, our God, it was also what keeps us on the right track. If you obey God, if you obey what the Word of God tells you, your Bible, you'll obey every city, state, and federal law in the Constitution. Bottom line, no ifs, ands, buts about it. If you obey God. So if you see people that are not doing right, that don't want to help people, the poor, don't want to help the hungry, don't want to help anybody, but just self-controlled, self-centered, they're not obeying God. I don't care what they say. I don't care who they pretend to be, because God knows. And there are scriptures that support everything. And maybe someday I may share that with you. If you have an interest in that, please let me know. Leave a comment for me. And also, if you like what I'm saying, please give me a thumbs up. But the bottom line of it all, that great experiment, we had peace and we came together like never before, folks. Never before. But then again, some folks felt that once we have gained a level of position, some folks may say power, others didn't like that. And now we're in a modern time where all of a sudden this hatred, this divide has been stirred up. And you know what? I have somebody tell me, and it's somebody who I know, somebody who I could have called on at any time in any place, and that person would have been there, no matter where it's at. Better than a lot of my friends back home. But they're entitled to their opinion. And a person said to me, Obama created the divide. I'm like, wow. Obama was a motivator. Did you notice that? He was. People call me a motivator. And it's based on, I guess, from my trainings. When I first got involved in Amway, network marketing, about, direct sales. Then I got in the insurance industry and got to a point where, based on my production, I got to speak at a national convention in my 20s. And all I was Amway, because all the motivational stuff that I read and listened to and participated in and been around. Zig Ziglar, Les Brown, all these motivational speakers, and a host of others, including Rick Jordan. who earned a percentage of $3 billion. He came to my hometown to help me. So you learn all these skills and then you apply them to other things. And they teach you how to be nice and kind and friendly to everybody. That's important, isn't it? Being kind and nice to people. My entire career, my profession was about protection of the public, protecting people. That's the criminal justice field. That's what I did. I was a cop. I was a district court juvenile officer, worked for a state court and commissioned deputy sheriff, and retired 25 years as a juvenile justice specialist, a fancy name for juvenile state level probation and parole. And I supervised 5 counties at the same time. Interacted with every division of law enforcement, including judges, DAs, assistant DAs, and so forth. I got to speak at schools everywhere. And I was a motivator from my earlier years of learning those things. And I saw kindness in people. And I projected kindness because I try to live by the word of God. Am I perfect? No, but neither are you. But that great experiment disclosed something for us all, that we can live together, that we can be happy together, because all we have to do is obey our laws. We need to get back to the grassroots, what make this country great. We've got every race in the world here, and I know some people in today's time don't like that. There are ways of doing things without hate. We have leaders today that have stirred that up. I'm going to just be real, folks. Why sugarcoat it? Our president, he leads the charge, really. That's why we are where we are today. That's why everyone feels this hate. We feel it. And we see it. Because we got to get back to the root of obeying God, and we got to get back to the root of obeying our laws. Because, folks, we got to live with each other. None of us are going anywhere. And you may not believe this, but I know this from my profession. I made a video of this as well. You got a segment out there that wants civil war. They really do. They're not happy the way things are. They're not happy to see people that maybe like me get a better position than them. But hasn't it always been based on your hard work, your honesty, your education, and your pursuit? What opened doors for us? Your pursuit. Don't expect anybody to give you anything. You got to earn it. And that's the American way. But I truly feel, folks, I'm part of that great experiment, and it worked. It really worked. So just in case you want to know it worked, yeah, it worked. I'm living results and so many others that many of you know. But some folks don't like that. Some folks want to take us back, truly take us back. But how can we do that now when we all have the same rights? And when this country have more guns than all the nations put together in this one country. And I'm really surprised, based on what's going right now with ICE apprehensions, that it's been going pretty nonviolent, really. Well, without ICE dishing it out, but in other words, not receiving it because of all these weapons we got around here. When I was a cop, when I stopped somebody, that's part of your training and how you approach the car and everything. Just hope that somebody don't pull a gun out on you, because you got hate out there, people. You've got evil out there. You've got people that are controlled by Satan. You do have evil people. There are killers that's roaming our streets and traveling our nation all the time, every day. And all any of us want is peace. We all want to be happy. We all want to feel joy and be loved. But We're the time right now. As the Bible tells us about the coming of the lawless one. Are we living in that time now? Just like the Bible tells us about the end times, where there'll be wars, rumors of wars, famine. It's just so much. But that lawless one they talked about is also considered the Antichrist. You can read that in 2 Thessalonians 2nd chapter. I believe verses 1 through 12. Check that out. But we have the experiment works. It worked. But now we're at a point now we got to battle good against evil. Because evil has raised its ugly head. And evil don't like certain people. But I still believe in law and order. I still believe the Lone Ranger, that goodness shall prevail, that God will win the final battle. Which side are you on? I'm an American. I was born and raised here, and I'm going to die here. I love this country. Oh, yes, I salute the flag. I pledge allegiance because it's my country too. And that's something all Americans should do, because other countries have their own flags and their own anthems, and we have ours. Let's show love. But how do we defeat hate? If we all get back on the side of right and wrong, love your neighbor as you love yourself, and obey all of our laws and Constitution. Boy, you're talking about a great place this will continually be. And not let it be destroyed by those that have ill intentions. I know some buddies listening right now. You feel different about certain things. I may feel the same way, but I may not feel that way. Right and wrong. Let's not support wrong. Whatever the objective is, it can be accomplished and done in a decent, orderly, and lawful way. Let's open our eyes, folks. Who's pushing your buttons? Who's controlling you? Because just like in 2 Thessalonians 2nd chapter, that verse 1 through 12, it talks about the lawless one and how it would deceive many people and cause them to believe the lie. And they too shall perish, believing that lie. Look it up for yourself. I'm not making it up. You can read it for yourself. Then you judge. Let's get back obeying the law. I'm a lawman. I retired as being a lawman, and I'm going to always be a lawman. I don't care who you are. It comes down to right and wrong. And the experiment worked. The experiment worked. That's the story of that great experiment of the nation's transition. Go ahead, give me a like if you enjoyed this story, which is really a point of education. It's got you to see where we came from and where we are today. And we all can still get along. They don't have to hate each other just because my skin is different from yours. Think about it. We can agree to disagree, but still it comes back down to the law. Will you obey the law? Will you follow those that are disobedient to the law? And if they are disobedient to the law, God would have the final say. But will you be with that person still in disbelief of God's word? Robert Wilkins, aka Basketball Tall, also your BT Dispatcher. Stick with me as I continue to bring you more insightful stories, including topics of today. And I'll see you next time.